This is the All Rev'd Up podcast, and I'm Reverend Emmett Price.
And I'm Reverend Irene Monroe.
Irene, before we introduce our special guest for this episode and launch today's conversation on reclaiming our time, let's take a moment to thank each and every one of our listeners. Thank you for your support, your encouragement, your feedback, and your comments, especially on episode 7, Where Do We Go From Here? Redux. Irene, we stimulated a lot of dialogue with that one.
Oh, indeed we did. We received a tsunami of emails and advice, and I thank you for it. Well, I also want to give thanks to the creative genius behind us, our producers, Cavante Small and Kyla Wright.
Here, and ditto. Today we have the renowned, amazing, phenomenal, extremely talented, brilliant, can I say more? Renee Graham.
Yay!
Hey, associate editor, opinion columnist at the Boston Globe. We see her and hear her on GBH, on C-SPAN, on MSNBC. I have seen her and we have seen her on numerous documentaries. I was watching something in 2019 on Sam Cooke, and here pops up Renee Graham of all people. Right. I watched something on the 70s, and who popped up? Renee Graham.
There you go.
Who popped up? Renee Graham. And then in the 90s, who popped up? Renee Graham.
There you go.
Everywhere, doing a whole lot of work. And what I love about Renee is down for Black people. She is one of the greatest writers of our generation. She tells it like it is. She says what needs to be said, and she does it in a way that makes you stop, read, and think. Renee, welcome. Welcome to All Rev'd Up.
Thank you so much. I cannot tell you how happy I am to finally make it to this show. So that was a bucket list moment for me. So thank you.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well, I'm so overjoyed that I am giddy. Absolutely giddy here. So I'm going to start with the first question. And one of the things I want our audience to know is that you are a superb writer, but also a wonderful public intellectual. Your columns are so so provocative, and they cause arguments. So I have to tell you an argument. You got to solve this argument. You wrote an op-ed October 5th. That said, save your prayers for those who deserve it. Well, you need to know, Renee, that you started a theological quandary for me and quarrel that is still going on in my Bible study. So, as one who likes to make this distinction between, blind faith and, blind obedience and reasoned faith. You put me in a really difficult place, particularly when we're told we're supposed to pray for those who speak against us. We're supposed to pray for our enemies. And this is what you said in the column. You said, when it comes to prayers, please do not speak for me. Unlike the president and his fellow Republicans, my hypocrisy has its limits. I will pray as much for Trump as he prayed for the millions infected of COVID. Girlfriend, you got to elaborate.
Look, when Trump was diagnosed with COVID, every single person would come on TV and say the same thing. They would talk about the story, then they would say, I'm sure I speak for all Americans when I say we're praying for the president's speedy recovery. And I just thought, you know what? I don't need you to speak for me, because I'm not wishing him ill will, but he's not getting my prayers. That was the feeling I had about it. And when I heard that, what it made me think of was something that happened back in March. We're talking March, when the lockdown had first started. And there were only maybe 200 people in this country who had died. And Peter Alexander from NBC News asked Trump, he gave him a softball question. And essentially it was, Mr. President, what can you say to alleviate the fears of the people in this country who are quite scared about what's going on? And his response to Peter Alexander was, I would tell them, you're a terrible reporter, and that's a nasty question. That was a softball. All I could think of, this man has no empathy whatsoever. He couldn't even simply say, I want to tell people to hang in there, and we're doing the best we can to keep them safe and healthy. He wouldn't even do that. So when it came time that he was the person diagnosed, I thought, no, I want to pray for all the people you've forgotten. I'm going to pray for all the people you've ignored. I'm going to pray for those poor Secret Service agents who had to be stuck in an SUV with you because you wanted to take a narcissistic joyride to make your little sad ego feel better. Prayers are important. I think they should be genuine, they should be sincere, and they should never be hypocritical.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Not only is that an amen, you need to be my minister.
One of the things that is really inspiring about your writing, but also your presence, Renee, is that you have the courage to say things that I think many people are afraid to say. They may think them, but they're afraid to say them. You have, just a gorgeous writing style. So it makes it, and I'm not going to say it makes it palatable because you tell it like it is, but we read it. But you have such great boldness and courage in your voice, both speaking, both writing, and your embodiment. Can you talk about how you developed that and how you got to where you are now?
The truth is that if you see these people over my shoulder, those are my parents. Mm-hmm. And that's where it really began. They were, both very outspoken. They were very opinionated. They did not hold back. And I grew up in a multi-generational family, and everybody had big opinions. And if you were going to say something, you needed to back it up. Like, that was the thing. You couldn't just say, yeah, I kind of think that. No. You had to give reasons why you felt that. Because if you didn't, they were going to leave you for dead, And so that's what I try to do, I think, when I'm writing. And I also feel like, I don't take for granted this platform that I have. And so I feel like if I'm going to have this opportunity to offer an opinion twice a week, I need to really say something, and I really need to believe in what I'm saying. So I try to be very careful about how I approach what I do, because I have to feel like I put my kind of whole body and soul into those words, because they're going to be printed under my name. And I'm going to suffer, for better or for worse, for what I say. So I have to be able to face down the many people who disagree with what I write, including that column. People thought it was callous. People thought it was cruel. But, I don't want to write anything and feel like, wow, I wish I hadn't said that. No. If I said it, I meant it. Everything I write is sort of dotted with, I said what I said.
You know what? I love that about you. You have really mastered the craft here. Your prose is just superb. The syntax of your sentences, I just read them over because it's descriptive. It is just like it's like the placement of words. It's like, oh my God, it's like the way Emmett plays the piano. It just flows. It has a musicality to it. So I have another question for you. So in October, right, soon after the death of George Floyd, which is supposed to be an inflection point, meaning, white people are addressing racism in themselves and in the system here. You had this wonderful conversation with Barbara Smith. It was titled "The Problem with White Supremacy." And the question you asked Barbara now, I'm going to ask you, because the question you said to Barbara is that language carries weight. Now, I'm paraphrasing what you said, but you said when this nation talks about race, there's an intentionality of what gets said and what doesn't. And so the column that now I'm referring to is that Black people voted for democracy while Trump supporters chose white supremacy. So a lot of people don't make the connection between systemic racism and white supremacy, or might use them interchangeably. Can you explain why language matter?
Well, I mean, it's how we understand the world. And so, for instance, if someone says that, something Trump said was, racially tinged, that sounds like there was just like a little shade of racism on it. It wasn't really racist. It was just sort of racially tinged. And that's very intentional. That's something that the media, especially these last 4 years, has wrestled with a lot. How do you talk about these things in plain English? And they've come up with all these bizarre euphemisms for lying and for racism. It's like, let's call things exactly what they are. And I think what was important about what Barbara Smith did, and that was based on a column she wrote, "The Problem with White Supremacy," was taking it beyond the idea of systemic racism and saying, essentially the scaffolding of systemic racism and police violence is always white supremacy. And so you have to call these things what they are. Otherwise, I don't really know how they deal with it. If someone has COVID, you're not going to say it's a little bit of flu, because we all know it's not a little bit of flu. You need to tell people exactly what this is. So I think that's why there's an intentionality in the way people use words. And I think sometimes it's said in such a way to downplay what's actually going on, because racially tinged or racially motivated, it's like, it was racist. If you did this racist thing, let's call it what it is, and then we can deal with it from that point. But if you're sort of downplaying it, then it doesn't sound quite as bad, and that lets the worst people off the hook.
But you got a lot of criticism. I remember a column way back last year, as a matter of fact, that you were talking about a little bit of racism is racism nonetheless, if you recall that column. And then you got scathing comments that a bunch of folks came to your defense. But nonetheless, how do you take that? Because you're so honest and you're diplomatic with it. You don't slam them. You just tell them the truth.
Well, there's two things. Comments that run with my column, I never see because I don't read them. There's just nothing good happens in the comment section. I avoid it. But I get it in my emails, and that's harder to avoid. And that becomes a whole other kind of thing. When someone says, like when Trump said it recently, I'm the least racist person in this room. Yeah, but that means you're still racist.
Go girl, go girl.
So, like, why are you holding that up like it's this wonderful thing? It's like, you're still racist. And people say that in this meaning as if to mean I'm not racist. It's like, no. You say, I'm anti-racist. You don't say I'm the least racist person. But that's how people would hear that. And once upon a time would just hear it and go, oh, great. That means you're not racist. And you think about it, it's like, no, that's not what he said. He said he's less racist than that guy, but he is still racist. And so I think people will read things into what people say and give them meaning they don't deserve.
Let me ask you this, because you and Irene are journalists. You all are both, and Irene has a beautiful writing voice as well. I'm just really inspired by her writing too. I'm wondering, as a non-journalist who gets to play one on the radio and on the podcast, how come we don't call white supremacy what it is, in plain sight, in plain view? Why is it that many journalists see what it is, but they feel like they can't say it either in writing or on television? And I'm certainly not talking about you, because you have called it out, which is why I'm asking you. But why is there an issue in actually identifying white supremacy as an illness?
Well, I think if you look at the media is still overwhelmingly white people. Mm-hmm. So if they're going to say that about someone else, maybe they're saying it about themselves, and it just makes them uncomfortable. So I think they come up again with all these other terms for it. I think, excuse me, we're seeing white supremacy being used more often now, but still not often enough, because it's triggering for a lot of white people who immediately stop listening. It's like using white privilege. It's the same kind of thing. So I think that's the biggest problem. I think it's the people who are in positions of power in the media, the people who are writing these stories very often, don't want to look internally to be able to write these stories honestly.
Wow.
The All Rev'd Up podcast, Big Sister Maya Angelou talked about phenomenal women. We have a couple of them with us on this podcast today. Of course, Reverend Irene Monroe, my partner in all things, All Rev'd Up. But we have Sister Renee Graham, a phenomenal woman in her own right. Stick with us. We'll be right back.
So first of all, let me just say that the Department of Treasury has cooperated extensively with the Senate Intel Committee, with the House Intel Committee, with the Senate Judiciary Committee.
My time.
Okay.
Matter of fact, time.
Mr. Secretary, the time belongs to the gentlelady from California.
Perhaps, Mr. Chairman, I don't understand the rules, because I thought I was allowed to answer questions.
Reclaiming my time. Would you please explain the rules and do not take that away from my time?
We will give the gentlelady adequate time.
You have been in service, public service, over 25 years. And now you're being rediscovered, and it's wonderful. Did you actually, one thing that I saw was the gospel clip of reclaiming my time. Have you seen that? You got to take a look.
You see that? Yes.
Take a look at this.
What about the letter that I sent you way back when? Reclaiming my time. Give me the answer to my question. Or don't open your mouth again.
This is the All Rev'd Up podcast. We're back and we are reclaiming our time. You just heard Congresswoman Maxine Waters holding court in the Financial Services Committee, officiated by Congress Representative Jeb Hensring. And she was getting into it with Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, who thought that his white privilege would allow him to just speak and speak and speak. And Auntie Maxine was like, no, baby, I'm reclaiming my time. I have the floor. Renee, you have been reclaiming our time on behalf of so many folks with your writing, with your speaking, with your presence, helping folks to realize that we are not an aberration, that Black folks have been here for a long time and our voice matters. Talk to us a little bit about how how you're motivated to do such and how you're inspired. You mentioned your parents a little earlier. How do you find the strength and the tenacity and the determination and the persistence to keep on keeping on?
There's so much going on in the world. You can't be a spectator and I can't be, because it's affecting me as well. And that's been a big thing of 2020. There's no distance between my life and what I write about. So when George Floyd is murdered, I'm thinking about the Black men I know. When Breonna Taylor is murdered, I'm thinking about the Black women I know. When COVID is disproportionately affecting communities of color, I live in a community of color. I have friends and family who live in communities of color. So it's almost like it just comes out in a kind of rush. Sometimes you just write a line and it just goes from there. And it's almost like a cough in the back of your throat. You have to do something about it. And so, that's what I try to do. I just try to hit the moment, what I'm feeling, and hoping that other people will connect with it as well.
Thank you. Well, my question in terms of reclaiming our time, I want to talk about the gender dynamics within the African-American community. I remember what Anna Julia Cooper said, that when and where I enter, the whole race enters and follows me here. Well, during the civil rights movement, we clearly knew about the sort of sexism. And by the time we get to the Black Power movement, it's the sexism and as well as homophobia. Some even say that some of that is also evident in the Black Lives Matter movement, even though the founders are 3 queer women here. And so one of the things that Reverend Price constantly tells me is that we're not a monolith. And so so I want to talk about brothers' reactions to us here. And one was, I will always remember, it was our brother, Dr. Jason Johnson here. He's a professor at Morgan State. And he was upset that Black women were supporters of Bernie. And this is a direct quote. He says, "I don't care how many people from the island of misfit Black girls you throw out there to defend you." And so now with the elections over, we have a VP, in the House here, Mamala in the House here. We got a huge nod to Stacey Abrams for tamping down voter suppression and voter intimidation in the state of Georgia. So my question to you, do you see Black women, straight or LGBTQ, shaping the conversation moving forward? And if so, how? And if not, how then do we reclaim our time?
You know what? We're not talking about Kamala Harris as the first, woman of color to be VP. We're not talking about Joe Biden, if not for Black women. And I remember back in the beginning of this year, it seems like a long time ago now, but Joe Biden was losing the caucuses and the primaries. And everyone was like, "Oh, what's happening? He's not winning anything." And I just kept saying to people, they haven't had any primaries or caucuses in places where actual Black people live. Black people are going to come out, and Black women came out for Joe Biden in South Carolina. I was down there for the primary, and there was just no question about it. He knew it, which is why he acknowledged it the other night and said, "You had my back, I will have yours." Yes, he will. We will make sure he does, because that is part of how we reclaim our time. We did this because we did what was best for us, but Black women were behind this. You're not still talking about Georgia being in play. And let's face it, it's barely in play. But you don't talk about Georgia being in play if not for the work of Stacey Abrams, if not for the work of LaTosha Brown and Black Voters Matter, if not for the work of all of these Black women heralded and unheralded, who made sure they got the vote out. People always say Black women are the backbone of the Democratic Party. No, Black women are the brains of the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
And it's about time that showed in the highest quarters of power.
So what do we do moving forward? What do we do moving forward? What is, if you were operating in your prophetic sensibilities, what is your vision? What do you want to see? What do we as Black folks do moving forward so that we can both reclaim our time, but also reclaim our country?
I think the important thing is Black people came out and voted. Black people are not about, at this moment, to turn around and go, okay, we're done, we'll see you in 4 years. And they're not going to let the candidates do that, the president-elect or the vice president-elect do that. Bills are due in this country. It is time that they be paid. And that is going to mean dealing with the underlying issues that caused the disproportionate effect of COVID in communities of color. That is going to mean dealing with education and housing and healthcare, and all of these issues that somehow get backburnered and get talked a lot during election years, but then somehow get lost. I don't think the momentum that Black people in this country feel is going to fade. And there's going to be the sense that, if it is good for Black people, it is going to be good for the country. That's just a fact, So I think that there's a way that Black people are going to continue to leverage their power. This feels like the first time they've actually gotten the credit for turning the tide in the election. Mm-hmm. And again, there's no way people let that drop at this point. There's too much on the table. There's too much going on. There needs to be, police violence needs to be dealt with. There's so many levels, and it's going to. We're going to see who Joe Biden puts in his cabinet. We're going to see who is advising Joe Biden, because there were Black women on his campaign, and with Kamala Harris as well. I would love for them to continue to be part of Joe Biden's presidency. I think that's what's important. I don't think Black people are going to drop the ball at this time at all. It's like, we gave it to you and we can take it away. You're going to give us what we asked for, because we weren't just voting for Joe Biden, we were voting for ourselves, and we're going to do right by ourselves.
Well, you're so right. We always are voting for ourselves here. And so the candidate we pick, we hope to sort of leverage our power and our genius here. So the question that I'm concerned about, we're a torn nation right now. So I'm always worried, but we've always been a torn nation here. So I'm worried that even though we got this critical mass, I'm still worried about telling Black people, I got you, but wait. I got you, but wait. So my question to you here is that what do we do with a country that is just split down the middle? He's gonna aim at trying to piece it together. Now, I'm happy with understanding this because I've lived it all my life. There's always been two Americas. As a matter of fact, there've been several Americas in the United States. Right. But tell me, how do you see him piecing this jigsaw puzzle?
Well, in a funny way, I actually wish he would stop talking about the divisions as if they're new. Oh. The idea that we're more divided now than we've ever been before. And the fact is that we're as divided as we've ever been. Mm-hmm. I found a story in the Atlantic that was written 7 years ago talking about how the country is so polarized and we're more divided. I thought, somebody writes that story every few years. The problem is that the sort of the big bang of division in this country, racism, is never dealt with. Until you deal with that, and until you deal with the ramifications of it, you're never going to have unity. So I don't want to hear from unity. America is not interested in unity. America is interested in guilt-free amnesia.
I love it. Okay, you're a wordsmith, Renee.
And you're not going to have unity until there is restorative justice. There's a reason why the expression "no justice, no peace." You can't have one without the other. You can't sort of like leapfrog and just no. We're not doing that. I feel like we've done that. I feel like Black people have been waiting for centuries for these things to be addressed. If not now, when? We have to remember, this didn't start with Donald Trump. It's not going to end when Trump finally leaves office. There's work to do, and America needs to, roll up its sleeves and actually start to get it done. Otherwise, we're going to continue to talk about this long after we're all gone. You've got to do something about this, otherwise this country is never going to heal. But you can't heal unless you deal with the wounds that are there and tend to them.
Renee, I'm going to squeeze one more question in because we're running short on time, but I want to know, when is your monograph coming out? When's your book coming out? I mean, listen, April Ryan got a book. I want to read Renee Graham's book. I mean, when's your book coming out? Talk to us.
Well, it's the most embarrassing question. I would like to think that someday before I leave this mortal coil, I will write one, but it has to be something I can live with. Because, I have friends who've written books and they write them for like 2-3 years, and I just got to find a thing that I feel like I can live with for that long and not hate. So one of these days, I keep saying, I've been saying pretty much my entire adult life, but one of these days it'll get done. In the meantime, keep reading the Globe. I right there.
of course,
absolutely.
Renee,
I got some ideas for you, Renee.
Thank you so much for spending time with us, for being with us, for just being a champion, for us. We're just so grateful to you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you both for all you do. Your voices are so important. So thank you.
Thank you.
Back at you.
Irene, send us off.
Well, I want to conclude by saying that in our efforts to become a multicultural democracy, one that Martin Luther King called the beloved community, and one that Renee Graham wrote another recent column titled, "Don't Make America Normal Again, Make It Better." So let not our fears be exploited, our fragilities exacerbated, and our divisions widened. Let us be united in this journey, embracing our differences and embracing our difference of opinions. In this pandemic and in this political season, we have bridges to mend and we have bridges to make. If we want people to cross their rivers of sorrow and their oceans of grief, while division abounds among us, may we be bold and courageous enough to chart a better future for ourselves and the nation. Let us pray for the leaders of this country to come together with leadership that guides us in ways that promote peace over war, tolerance over intolerance, reason over blind passion, and love over faith. Let us remember that the longing to reclaim our time in this democracy is also the longing for social justice that welcomes all, that nurtures one another, that works for justice, and that cares for the earth. Let us go forth now and do that which calls us to make our nation, this world, and ourselves more loving, more compassionate, and yes, more united. Amen.
Amen.
And Ashe.
Ashe. Ooh-wee, you told that. Go on, Miss Sister.
Was inspired because Renee was coming on the show.
All Rev'd Up is brought to you by us, the Revs. Our amazing producers are Kyla Wright and Cavante Smalls.
Music for this episode is brought to you by Reverend Price's son, musical prodigy Emmett G. Price IV. All Rev'd Up is distributed by GBH.
Additional thanks to Bob Kempf, Nina Perzuki, Chelsea Mers, Meredith Neerman, and Zach Waldman.
If you like what you hear, let us know. Give us a review on Apple Podcasts and follow us at All Rev'd Up Pod on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube.
Feel free to send us a note, a question, or a comment to allrevduppod@gmail.com. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of All Rev'd Up.